the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
Welcome to the Brock v. Mac Legendary Rivals podcast, and we are doing something I think that is a unique privilege, and we are talking to the patriarch of the first family of sports in Newmarket, Rich Lunney, who, let's just give everyone some great perspective here. His son pitched at Mac and won the SIBO award the year after I did. So, all due respect, that takes some doing. So a great baseball pitcher, but his grandson, Reid, now plays stars at Brock in the infield. And his granddaughter, Abby, is on Team Canada and is up at Nipissing playing hockey, competitive hockey. So really, Rich Lunney, you have the most unique seat in all of sports when it comes to Brock and McMaster, in that you missed one game in 5 years when your son was playing, and I'm sure you're onto a similar situation here now with Reid playing at Brock. Tell me a little bit about what it's like presiding over a family of great athletes like that.
It's been a privilege. That's all I can say. We watched the kids being born. We watched them grow up. We had a small part in helping them to learn how to play baseball or hockey, whichever it was. Reid played hockey as well. And then watching them grow from a little child, loving a sport, to growing into an adult and excelling at those sports. It's just been, my wife and I, Sharon, we've thoroughly enjoyed every minute. It's just been such a pleasure to be able to see them achieve what they've achieved, and they've achieved so much at such a young age. I played ball till I was 37, I think, and I never achieved anything close to what either one of them did or what Doug did either. So we're very proud grandparents for sure. It's just been our pleasure to be part of their lives and part of their growth and development in the sports they love.
Well, I'm pretty sure at this point you'll know every, secret route to get to Hamilton and to get to St. Catharines on the back roads from Newmarket. And really, I think for everybody to understand your story, Newmarket is kind of a, we could rechristen it Lunney Town, I suspect, if we were wanting to do it. But tell me a little bit about your connection to the community of Newmarket, and maybe, obviously, you're going to have passed on a love for sports, playing baseball till you're 37. So tell me a little bit about growing up and how you fell into sports, and particularly baseball.
Well, my brothers and I and sister grew up on a farm in Zephyr, which is about 20 minutes northeast of Newmarket. We grew up there. We all played fastball. We didn't play baseball. Fastball was king back when we were young, at least in this area anyway. And we had a really good fastball team when we were growing up called the Zephyr Spud Kings. I think we won 5 or 6 Ontario championships, with ranging from, I think we started in midget and worked our way up to intermediate. And so that's where it all started. And then we were decent players for sure. And eventually the Newmarket Rays at the time was the senior A fastball team in Newmarket. and they eventually persuaded my brother Mike, my brother Bill, and myself to come out to Newmarket and play with them. So that's how we got started with Newmarket, I guess. And we didn't play there at all until almost, late teens for sure. And then we traveled the country playing fastball. Back then we'd play every weekend. We played tournaments every weekend. We probably played 100 games a season, fastball. But, it had to end eventually. And when I was 37 and Doug wanted to play ball, I stopped playing and started coaching him. And I should have gone further back even than that. My dad and my uncle played softball in Zephyr as well. And so we had their model to follow. And they were very good players too. And certainly inspired us to play. They were, I don't know whether you'd call them taskmasters or not, but they certainly inspired us. My dad used to say, we didn't come here to lose. And that was pretty well every game I ever played in Zephyr. So we had a driving force behind us that inspired us to be the best we could be all the time and never be satisfied unless you're the best. So that's where it all started, really.
And you bring up an interesting thing that, a lot of the players have talked about, but you have a couple brothers that are playing. Was it competitive amongst the three of you, or are you all just pulling in the same direction, pulling for each other? But I know that sometimes with brothers, it can be, I just want to one up my brother here. I want to be the best of the three of us.
I don't think that really was ever an issue with the three of us. We just had a good team, and we wanted to win the championship every year. I think really deep down for my dad, because it was so important to him. But I don't think we ever really felt one had to beat the other. It was more we had to beat everybody else, and most of the time we did.
Well, that's and before we get into Doug coming along and these kinds of things, it really does bring up an interesting conversation, which is fastball used to be really dominant in the province. Okay, and it wasn't just out your way. My uncle played in Glenmorris and in Paris and in Brantford, and we've talked specifically about the guys on the Brock team from Orono, the influence of Pete Landers. But, it's got surpassed by baseball. And I've always thought it was for a couple of reasons. One is obviously the Blue Jays and their popularity that changed people wanting to play baseball. But also that fastball at its highest level is really a pitcher-catcher game. There's very little anything else going on. It's just, you get a great pitcher, it's going to be a 1 or a 2 hitter, and it's going to be a shutout. And that becomes a little bit redundant after a while. You keep running into great pitchers, and you're like, it's tough. You're a guy that played but then coached baseball. Why do you think baseball kind of surpassed fastball over time here?
Well, I think most of it is exactly what you said. It was such a pitcher-dominated game, and hitting was very difficult. I mean, my brother and I happen to be pretty good hitters, so. But I think that was the big issue, and the trouble is, you had sponsors on a lot of these teams, and if the sponsor got the best pitcher, then all the players went to that team to be with the best pitcher because they couldn't beat that particular guy. So eventually, 1 or 2 teams were, nobody could beat them because they had all the best pitchers and all the best players. And I think eventually people just decided, well, I don't want to play this anymore. And they started playing slow pitch and so on and so on. But the younger players, I think the Blue Jays were the main push behind that. Like I know Doug, when Doug was young, he never even thought about playing fastball. There was still fastball being played, but it never entered his mind to play fastball. He wanted to play baseball from the get-go. So that's why I coached baseball, because that's what he wanted to play. And I mean, a lot of the games are exactly the same. There's obviously differences, but you still got to hit the ball, catch the ball, throw the ball, and run the bases. Those parts of the game are exactly the same. The pitching is what is different. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think 60 feet, 6 inches, and aluminum bats at the time in particular helped make baseball a little more, there's a little more offense in it than a fastball game. And, the hard part was there were a lot of diamonds that were designed for fastball. So, you get some pretty, especially when you're young, you'd end up playing on some pretty horrific diamonds that were converted fastball diamonds or converted slow pitch diamonds. But so tell me, as a coach, was it difficult? Because your son, is someone I'm very envious of because he could also play as well as pitch. I might be the originator of the expression PO, but a pitcher only. Tell me what it was like coaching Doug, because he was probably different as a position player than he was as a pitcher, but he did both, right?
Oh yeah, he did both, but I wouldn't say he was different, really. I mean, he was such a fierce competitor no matter what he was doing. He expected to strike out every batter. He expected to get a hit every time up at bat. Like, he was just a fierce competitor from day one, and loved to practice. I saw his podcast, and he commented about how he loved to practice and turn double plays and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, he was his granddad's grandson for sure, because he was as competitive, and he still is, very much like my dad. Just a fierce competitor. He just hates to lose, and certainly, when he's participating, he expects to like Dave Steeb's book said, tomorrow I'll be perfect. Well, that would be Doug. Doug wanted to be perfect in every way, every game.
Yeah, it's I've seen him throw, so I kind of know that gene quite well. Was it, at this point, because of the legacy of your brothers and your coaching in Newmarket, before Doug decides to go to McMaster? As a parent, at that point, are you just, I'm sure that there's some whispers of the U.S. and there, everyone that played at that time would get some interest from the U.S., but it was a lot harder than it is now. Granted, there was, restrictions on visas and that kind of stuff. What were you really wanting from his university experience? And, at that point, there's really no Canadian baseball to speak of. So I'm sure it was more, find a course of study that, will lead to some sort of career, I think, is what most parents were looking for. But do you remember what you were thinking at the time?
Doug was pretty much self-motivated. He decided what he wanted to do. He did explore the U.S. to some degree, but back then, it may be different now, but back then, the scouts, you had to be a certain height and throw this many miles per hour, or they really weren't interested. And so, I think he realized that going to the States, no matter how good he was, because he was one of the best pitchers in Ontario when he was 16, 17, 18. He was amazing, like he was later. But, because he was not a big man and he didn't throw exceptionally hard, there really wasn't a lot of interest, I don't think. He pursued it a little bit, as he mentioned in his interview. But I think in the end, he realized that, that maybe wasn't going to happen. I want to get a good education and have a good future, which he's had. And I think that's why he decided to stay here primarily. It wasn't about baseball as much as it was getting a good education. And at Mac, he ended up getting both.
Yeah. So as a parent, you weren't pushing for U of T or somewhere, York or somewhere closer. It was...
No. As parents, we never pushed our kids into anything, whether it be sports, school, whatever. And as I said, Doug was such a highly motivated young man. You didn't have to say, are you working hard at school? Or you never had to say that. Whether it be high school or university, he was always he gave 100% in the classroom, just like he did on the sports field, and always wanted to be the top dog in the class, so there was pushing required, I can assure you.
No, that's great. So, do you remember the first time you meet Coach Graves and Coach Romanowski, the coaches at McMaster? Because it's always interesting when you've been a baseball coach and you're seeing other coaching now influencing your son.
Well, it was actually quite funny, because when we saw Doug's first game with McMaster, it was in Dundas, because that's where they played at the time. They didn't go to Bernie Arbor yet. And the first game Sharon and I saw Doug pitch at Mac was the first game I ever watched him play from the other side of the fence.
Oh,
I him every game he'd ever played up until that time. So it was kind of odd, really. Obviously we were hoping for the best, that he'd do really well, but yeah, it was kind of a weird feeling. I've never seen him play except from the bench.
Yeah,
and he happened to be playing Brock that night too.
Well, there you go. There are some great parents, and people don't understand the value of parent supporting programs like this. But McMaster, have Adam Dusky's parents and Roger and Jane Reeson come out and support Brad. And tell me a little bit about how the parents tend to. It's different than when you go, you freeze your butt off at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to a hockey arena and you're sitting there sucking on your Tims because you're just trying to stay warm, and you kind of tolerate the early morning games and you kind of hope that the team advances over the course of a tournament, for example. And then by the time if you get to Sunday afternoon, you're pretty happy campers. But baseball, when it's not freezing cold, tends to attract a lot of people who are very friendly, because the game is not, doesn't lend itself to the hitting and the craziness that sometimes goes with hockey. So did you feel it was a little bit of a different vibe going and watching baseball as opposed to hockey games?
I would say so. To be really honest, we never got to know a lot of people. I guess I was just too focused on the game and how they were doing and how Doug was doing to really pay much attention to who else was there. Now we were pretty close with the Reesons, and but not a lot. Like I don't recall being really close with that many parents. They were there, we were there, but as I say, we were so. I guess that's the dad in me. We were so focused on the game all the time, and coming from Newmarket, any weeknight games in particular, it was all we could do to get there in time. Like we might miss a few innings of the first game of a doubleheader because it was mostly doubleheaders, and a lot of them were during the week back then. So and there was no 407, and there was no link in Hamilton. It was all we tried every way under the sun to get there as quickly as we could, and it wasn't easy, but we managed somehow. I don't know how.
Well, I think I should state it now that in 5 years of playing, you missed one game. So that says an incredible amount towards your dedication to seeing Doug's games. Do you have any reflections on some of his teammates? Because you ended up meeting some of the teammates, but they also some of them came to play for you while you were coaching in Newmarket in the summer. And some real characters like Bill Newton, but also, people like Brad Reeson, who, is a different perspective hearing what people have to say about Brad as a coach. So tell me what it was like meeting Brad, but then also coaching him.
Well, he was, as has been discussed on many of your interviews, he was just a phenomenon, both defensively and offensively. I don't know that I ever saw a hitter who was so dedicated to his technique, and everything being exactly the same every time. I mean, and Roger was the one that taught him all that and instilled all that in him, I'm sure. He was just, you certainly wanted him up there when the game mattered, because more times than not, he would come through with a big smash. And that year that they won. I have no idea what his batting average was or how many RBIs he had, but he'd be right at the top, I'm sure. Defensively, well, him and Doug, we always said the two of them had the best hands we'd ever seen. Reid's pretty close, but but yeah, he was amazing ball player, but so modest and quiet. Never said boo hardly. Just a credit to his whatever team it was, certainly to Mac. And we got to know Roger and Jane pretty well, and we did see them a fair bit during the time that they played together, and we've seen them a few times since. And they haven't changed a great deal. They're just wonderful people, and they were probably the people we were the closest to. Now, as far as other guys on the team, Billy, of course, I've often said Billy's like another son to me. I mean, he really is.
Condolences.
But he really is. I mean, Billy is just a salt of the earth guy, would do anything for anybody. And again, a fierce competitor. When he played here in Newmarket, same thing. He was just a fierce competitor. I wish he'd have been able to play here longer. But he's just a great guy. Everybody loves Billy. And then Cooper came just for one season. And that might have been our best team we ever had, the year that those two guys and the rest of our team were together, because he was amazing too. We never got to enjoy having him on our team very long, just for the 1 year, but he sure made a huge difference to our team. And
talented character guys make a big difference. We had a year in Thornhill where a bunch of us ex-Brock guys went there, and Colin Tyler and Matt Fletcher and myself and Rick Bottomley. And Thornhill had always been kind of a scuffling kind of a team. They would win a few games, but not really be a threat to, at that time, North York or some of the top senior teams. And we ended up winning one year. So I think you learn a lot at the university level. You get bigger, you get stronger, and you get better because the repetitions are a lot. And, a lot of people will have started to reach their peak of their powers at 23, 24 because they're physically stronger than they were when they were younger. The funny thing about Brad is he retired not too long after playing in Newmarket. He didn't play as long as a lot of people did. Because he went and discovered a bunch of new passions that were tied to cottaging. And, I've told this on a couple of other podcasts, but when I would go to visit him at his cottage, it was torture. I'd come with my two girls and want to be drinking a beer, and he'd be like, let's swim across the lake and back. So I'd begrudgingly jump in the water and swim across the lake and back. And about an hour after that, he'd be like, let's go for a run. And then we'd do a 5K run. And he didn't run, the funny thing is about Brad, he was super quick, but not fast, if that makes sense. He had quick reflexes, and but not a fast runner. So we would do this 5K, and then he'd wait about an hour, and I'd crack open a beer finally and enjoying the sun. And he'd be like, Mike, let's go for a bike ride. And at that point, I'd tell him to piss off. Be like, I didn't come here to do a triathlon. But, Rich, it's... So you're a very dedicated parent that's going to a lot of games, and tell me what it was like winning a national championship in the midst of all that.
With Reid's team.
Yeah, you were with Doug's team when you guys won in '97.
Yeah. Well, we've got two national championships, so I had to make sure I knew which one we were talking about. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was like my parents. My wife's parents, like the whole family, came to that tournament, that national championship tournament in St. Catharines. And it was a big deal in our family, even though my brothers and I played ball our whole lives, and my brother Bill was the biggest star. He was picked up by a lot of teams to pitch, but even he never won a national championship. He went to a lot of them, but he never won one. And, so when Doug won, that was a big deal because that was the first national championship in our family in any sport. And to see him pitch that no-hitter against Laval that night, it was absolutely amazing. And it kind of confirmed, that he was one of the best pitchers in the country, even though the scouts didn't think so. But yeah, it was incredible. And that's why we kept going all the time. The games were it's just different. There's something about university baseball that's totally different from summer baseball. I can't explain what it is really. I know for the players, it was, all the practice and the camaraderie because you were together every day and that. But from a fan's point of view, my wife and I have often said the most fun time we've ever had in baseball so far is traveling to watch Doug play all those years ago. It was just such a special time. And the games, it was like the World Series every game. I don't know why we felt that way, but it just was. It was special, a special time, and we really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was really intense, and you have to beat these kind of juggernaut teams. If you think about it, Brock at that time had gone to the finals 2 years in a row and would win back-to-back the year after McMaster wins. Laval had already won a national championship and was going for a second one. These are teams that are really these very big giants of early, college and university baseball in the country. And you're right, there was a lot of unexpected rivalry. Like I joke a lot about McMaster for some reason really despising Durham College and Sam Dempster. And it was because there just was an uncomfortable, they set Billy Newton off in the very first game. So then that, that's going to set the tone for years afterwards. If Bill says, we don't like these guys, they really don't like you. And that's going to stay in that program for a long time. So maybe it was just sensing that the competition was a little bit more heated than summer ball, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, the season being as short as it is has something to do with it, I'm sure, too. Like the season is so short. I mean, we always say, gee, I wish we could make it 3 months instead of a month and a half, but it's just not to be. So you cram in what you can cram in, and it's the same now going to watch Reid play. Like we can't wait for the weekend to come so we can go to Brock and see the games being played. It's just so special. And I know he feels Reid just loves it. It's all he ever talks about in the summer, and he's always letting us know what we did this week and how practice went, and I had a great practice tonight or whatever. Like it's Brock to him is just. I know the McMaster guys aren't going to like this, but he just thinks Brock is the best place on. I really, he's so proud to be on the team and so proud of what the team does and what it's accomplished. And and Doug was the same at Mac.
Yeah. So Rich, that's a really great question, actually. When and I kind of helped a little bit. Doug may have phoned me and said, can you, do a solid with the coaches and see whether Reid can go play at Brock. And, I had to call down a few times and kind of twist some arms, but it got done. Did it seem weird at first, given the length of time that you had been cheering for Mac against Brock in really intense games to all of a sudden have to adjust to, oh my goodness, my grandson is going to the enemy and is going to be wearing those colors? How weird was that?
Well, it's funny, Mike. I never really looked. All I was focused on was Reid and him being happy and successful. And that it happened to be Brock, oh well, it didn't really bother me. I know some of the guys, and I don't know if it really bothers them or they just like to give Doug the gears about it. But yeah, it really. As I say, we were just so thrilled when he went and he tried out for the team, and he'd call us every night and say, I made the next night, I made the team. He was so excited. And then when we went to the first doubleheader in London, and he didn't start the first game, and he came in partway through, and then he started. And then from then on, he was the starting shortstop, and he's played almost every game ever since. So, it was, we were more, I guess it was the same really when Doug played. We were more focused on Doug than even though we felt it was our team by the end of 5 years. We knew everybody, the players anyway. And it's not quite the same yet with Reid, because I don't know why. Maybe we're not quite, we don't know the coaches like we knew Donnie. Like Donnie was always having team parties and stuff, and everybody'd be invited. We became very close with Donnie, and we've kept in touch. We send Christmas cards still. When they played in Nova Scotia 2 summers ago, Donnie and Pat came up and saw a game and went out for dinner and all that kind of stuff. And we don't have that kind of a relationship at Brock. I'm not really sure why, but we don't. So it's different but the same.
Yeah, I know Coach LePage quite well, and Coach Del Rio, who are both on the coaching staff there. And I think it's, one of the harder parts is they're in very high demand careers, and Mark's in particular, there's a confidentiality that goes with it. So he kind of maintains a bit of a distance comparative to past coaches. I think Coach Lounsbury and Coach McRae were a little more, I think, outgoing with the position because they could afford to be, given their relative career choices. But I do know that they very, very much value Reid playing there, and they value the support of fans and alumni and the rest of it. And there's always been a contrast between McMaster and Brock. Brock has always been a program, like very much like being part of a machine, and McMaster was always this, I say it now, but I also said it at the time, it was a little bit like a gang of pirates. It was these weird characters all on a ship that would come rolling in, and, it was, and very strange given my background that, I probably would fit in better on the pirate ship, and Brad Reeson probably much more in the kind of very programmatic way that we were doing things. But I'm kind of glad that we all have these different experiences, because I think it was more well-rounded for us, for mm-hmm. Brad and probably Doug, who are more subdued personalities, to be around people like Billy Newton and Rob Pino and, Adam Dusky in particular. These are some boisterous, fun people that probably brought out a little of the personality there. And
I think.
Yeah, and for Reid, maybe going to Brock, which has got a lot of structure in it, maybe just allows him to feel very much like he's part of something that just allows him to be, very much functional, right? And it's hard because we'll touch on her, but he's got a sister that's just a dynamite hockey player. And, siblings always naturally feel that, there's got to be enough light to go around, enough sunshine to go around. It's hard when you got a sister who's that bloody good, from that perspective.
Yeah, I don't see that with them at all.
Yeah.
Like Reid is so proud of her, and she's so proud of him. If they don't get a chance to see each other play that much now, especially, but when they do, they go and watch, and you can just tell that they're just beaming with pride for their sister or their brother, and which is wonderful to see. I'm glad they're not sort of battling with each other for approval or whatever you might call it. They're not. They're very different kids in some ways, but they're just sweet kids, both of them. They're just so kind and helpful, and they do anything for anybody, and they both give everything they've got to whatever they're doing. They're so dedicated. I'm not saying they don't have a good time. Of course they do. That's part of the whole thing. But they're very dedicated. Like Reid loves the structure, I think, at Brock. He's like his dad. He loves to practice. He loves to go to the cage and hit and field ground balls and so on and so on. He just loves that. Where some guys, that's probably drudgery. Let's get to the game. but he's not like that. He loves the practice and the structure. I called him last week and I said when the Blue Jays started and Bichette was having a kind of a rough time in the field, I said, Reid, I'm going to call up the manager and tell him that he needs to bring you in because you're a better shortstop than Bichette. I said, yeah, but you're a better shortstop. And
Yeah.
he said, well, thanks, Granddad, but I don't think so. So he's very modest too.
Well, but there is a good expression that you got to love if you love the work of what you're doing, especially in performance-based sports, love the work, right? Love the batting practice. It just reminds me of Brad Reason used to put on those work gloves to take batting practice instead of batting gloves. He just was that guy. And, I think there is a joy to take joy in your work. And if you take joy in your work, you'll perform on the field. Really interesting to ask you this as a baseball coach, but one who's now watched a couple generations on the field. Is there a difference in the style of play that you're seeing now compared to when Doug was playing?
I wouldn't say a great deal. They're very similar in how they play, and I think for the most, like I'm a very old school guy because I'm an old guy, but certain things that I would do, like I'm a great guy to move the runner over and squeeze bunt and stuff like that, where they just don't do that stuff anymore, hardly ever anyway. So things like that are different. Brock is definitely a very aggressive base running team, much more than my teams were, or even the Mac teams were. So yeah, there are some differences, I guess. The pitchers are obviously throwing a lot harder now than they did back then. And they throw a lot of pitches that they weren't even thinking about yet back then, I think. But as far as the rest of the game's concerned, I don't think I really see that much of a difference. Everybody says how slow baseball is, and I always argue with them. You're just not smart enough to figure out what's going on. That's why it seems boring to you. I don't buy that. It's too slow.
No, it's not. It's just a different kind of a game. It's an individual battle, and then it's a team oriented. It's different from any number of perspectives. Are you noticing a difference with the wood bat versus the aluminum bats that they're playing with?
Oh my God. There's two sides to that. I remember the last year we used aluminum bats in senior. And I think the championship game at the elimination was like 24-21 or something, because we were playing in Tecumseh at Lacasse Park, which is not a big park. And there were just rockets flying out of there all weekend. Well, then when they switched over to the wood bat, now the pitchers, we can actually get somebody out now, and I'm not going to get killed standing out on the mound. I thought it was the biggest change for the positive. That there was a lot more plays, there was a lot more action, not as many home runs, which you probably loved.
Yep.
But yeah, but for the kids, I almost felt the opposite. I always felt they brought the wood bats in way too young. The kids could hardly lift them, and you go from it's not anymore, but Pee-wee, where you're on a small field with aluminum bats, shorter bases and everything else. And then you go to Bantam, you're on the full-size diamond, wood bats, 60 feet, 6 inches, major league field, and you're only in minor Bantam. So, I think they made some mistakes along the way with the wood bat, but I think for the most part, it was a huge improvement for baseball in Ontario anyway. And I know in the States, they're still using aluminum bats, and they think, wow, I can hit the ball a mile. Well, yeah, so could we if we used aluminum bats. But I don't know how you felt as a pitcher or as a player when they got rid of aluminum bats, but they were okay for the kids because they're light and they can swing them easy and learn how to hit. But as they got older, I just felt that, aluminum bats made pretty good hitters out of kids that really weren't hitters at all.
Yeah,
And
well,
then when they went,
I pitched in Tecumseh for a year, so I know that park real well. I also know what it's like to, I pitched in one of my best games that I ever pitched was against a guy named Brett Gray. And Brett, I think, holds maybe the North American or maybe the world record for strikeouts in a game. He struck out 24, I think, in a start. And it was in Strathroy. And Strathroy's Park, the left field fence was 200 and I'm going to say 270 from home plate. And it's a 1-0 game. I'm winning 1-0 in the 6th inning, and it's a 7-inning game. And I give up a little fly ball that skinned the fence coming down the other side at 271 feet away from home plate to give up a 2-run home run to lose the game. And that sticks with me to this day. It's unbelievable. The wood bat addition really kind of helps with things that aren't earned either way, right? Like when you swing a bat and you get one off the handle or off the end, and because you're using aluminum, it shanks over the first baseman or the third baseman and dots the line, and it becomes a double. Or a lot of people forget that you can also take kind of like a check swing or a really bad swing, and because it's aluminum, it drives the ball down hard into the dirt, and it can take a high bounce, and you get a lot of infield hits from aluminum bats that you don't get with wood bats. And I just felt, from a pitching standpoint, it was amazing, the difference. But it made for a higher quality game because there were a lot of semi-good players who look like superstars using aluminum. And then I think that, a really great hitter is still going to be able to square it up on wood, but one who's not a great hitter, who's got maybe a little bit fortunate using aluminum, when you switch them over to wood, it exposes it pretty quick. And also for pitchers, ones who throw poker straight and don't have movement on the ball and don't locate real well, they would roughly be the same with wood as they would with aluminum. But the guys who could move the ball and really hit their spots, you end up breaking bats a lot of the times. And a lot of that really allows your better players, I think, to be better. But you're right; they shouldn't be introducing this stuff when the kids are young, because then it becomes a lot like fastball, where it's a pitcher catcher game, and we have too much pitch, strikeout, walk kind of as it is at the major league level. We don't need that in the youth, because they'll lose interest in the game. Really interesting for you to say that, Rich. You contrast that with, a 3-hour drive to North Bay to watch your granddaughter play hockey. Tell me what the difference is for you being a hockey fan and a baseball fan, other than the temperature inside the arena. Different game, different kinds of things to consider. How have you enjoyed being a hockey fan as well?
Oh, yeah. We watched Abby since she was 4 years old, and we have hardly. The only time we would ever have missed her games is if Reid was playing. Like, they're both playing, so you can't be at every one every time. But no, going to watching her grow up and play junior in Aurora, and then going to Nipissing. Like, again, as a fan, I'm so focused on Abby that I don't always. Doug will say, "Well, do you know so and so on York?" And I'd say, "No, I'm watching Abby. I'm watching." I focus so much on my own team, whatever sport it is. Some people are great scouts because they watch other teams and they know what they do. And I don't know that. It's not my thing. I don't worry about what the other team's doing. I just focus so much on what our team's doing. And again, you get to know the players. You get to know the parents. It's, as you say, it's a totally different game, but it's still fun to watch your grandchild or your team, whatever it is you're focusing on. It's just so fun to watch them accomplish things. Nobody's perfect. They don't have a perfect shift or a perfect game every time out, but there's always little things that they do well, and you think, wow, did she ever make a nice back check there, or what a smart pass she made through all those legs, or whatever it might be. It's totally different because it's such a fast game compared to baseball. Things happen so quickly, and you're not on the field or on the ice for the whole game or the whole period. You're on, you're off, you're on, you're off. Where baseball, you're out in the field for the whole half inning. It's so different. And but I don't think as a fan, either Sharon or I watch any differently as far as who we're watching and what we're watching for. We're very focused on. We never sit with the rest of the people. Sharon and I sit in our own two seats. Sometimes other people will sit near us, but we sit at center ice no matter where everybody else sits, because we can focus on the game. We can see the whole play at both ends, and we're right across the ice from Abby's bench, so we can see what's going on over there. But yeah, like driving to North Bay became nothing. It's 3 hours each way, but we look forward to it, to be honest. Like during the week we were thinking, oh, geez, Friday morning we're heading for North Bay again, and we were so excited to go, even at right up until the end. We went 8 times to North Bay this winter, and we loved every one. We loved every time we were up there, and we can't wait for the fall to see Reid, and then for the late fall to see Abby again. Like, thank God we've got baseball this summer to tide us over.
Yeah, well, it's funny. My daughter is up at Nipissing as well, playing on the varsity soccer team. So we'll get used to driving up, the highway.
It's a great highway. Great highway.
It is. You see a lot of different things too, and you get a different slice of Ontario. There's a lot of rock, and there's some interesting beautiful towns, and it's quite beautiful, especially when it's not snowing.
So in the summer, roads are nicer too.
Yes, they are. So soccer, I'm happy for soccer season as opposed to hockey. But Rich, why don't we cap this off by talking about the experience of going out east and watching? I believe Doug coached Reid to a national championship, right? So we've got multiple generations, all of you gathered in. Was it Nova Scotia that you went to? And talk about that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sharon, the team flew down, and most of the parents flew down. And I had just bought a new car, and Sharon and I said, "Well, you need somebody to take various." It was at the time when they were worried about luggage and things. You're worried about, we'll send all the equipment on the plane, and none of the bats will show up or whatever. So I said, well, don't worry. We'll take all the team gear, and some of the treasured, like Reid had just got a new glove, and he said, don't fold that up, Granddad. Just sit it nicely up on top. Keep an eye on it. But anyway, we took all the equipment that they didn't want to take on the plane, and we drove down, and we had a really nice time driving down. We stayed over a couple of nights, and then we got to the hotel, and it was a very unique situation. Again, we were very close to this team. I mean, a lot of these kids we watched grow up and play in Newmarket, and it was Doug's team, so I was still somewhat, and I'm just a statistician, keep score, announce the games and stuff like that. But I still felt part of the team, and to see them win or do so well in Windsor. Again, we'd been to the elimination I don't know how many times between junior and senior, never won. We came third once, and to finally get to go to the Nationals, when we had the little huddle, I said, guys, you've got me somewhere that I've never got in my life, and I've been in baseball for over 50 years. And so we got to go, and it was very well run, and the the team was very, very good. We had a really solid team, good pitching staff, some great hitters, great defense. I mean, Doug's a great coach, so he had trained most of these kids all the way along. By the time you get to junior, you're not really teaching them too much anymore. You're managing them really more than anything else. But Doug has a very unique managing style. He's not yelling and screaming. He's not all over them when they make a mistake. He's a very low-key, quiet manager. And I think most of the guys at that age really liked that. They'd go through a wall for Doug.
Yeah.
And to see them do as well as they did, and it got down near the end, and I think it was the semifinal. Can't remember what it was, but Reid had a 3-run homer to ice the game, and I mean, you can imagine how excited we were about that. But just to see them, and they got to the final, and they were like Doug. As most teams, if you have a coach for a long time, you kind of develop the coach's personality, right?
Yep.
And they were very quiet and calm going into the last game against Dartmouth, the home team. The stadium was absolutely packed, and there were about 20 Newmarket fans, all sitting behind third base, and it was just great. These guys will never experience that again, I don't think. Having that many people and very raucous, they'd be yelling at the third baseman or the left fielder, who just awful. But that's the way they are some places.
Yep.
But it didn't bother them really. They just played their game and ended up coming out on top. And funny enough, the very last out of the game was a ground ball to Reid. Flip to second, game over, win the championship. And so, I mean, that was really nice for him to be the final out. And but yeah, they were such a close-knit group, and that's the key, really. I think you'd probably agree on any team you've been on. If you have a close-knit group that play for one another as opposed to being selfish and playing for yourself, they weren't like that at all. Everybody did their part and chipped in. Nobody complained if they didn't play or whatever. And to have them win the championship, and then of course when they won, the mayor of Newmarket said, "Well, when will you be home?" And we're going to have a big celebration in the band shell behind the main street in Newmarket. So we rushed home because they were going to have it when the team got back, and we had to get home.
Had to beat the plane.
Yeah. So anyway, it all worked out great, and it was really nice. I think that the players that were able to be there really appreciated it and really enjoyed it. And as we said to them, most people play ball their whole career, their whole life, and never win an Ontario championship, never mind a national championship. So to win one, it was just absolutely the greatest thing ever. And then, of course, that winter, Abby goes to Sweden and wins the world championship in hockey. So we got a gold medal from the national championship and a gold medal from a world championship. And again, how many families get to experience that? It was, you can't explain how proud we were, and I know Doug and Lisa were the same. And they're two special kids, I'll tell you. They're just can't say enough about them, and that just says what kind of parents Doug and Lisa are. The way they've raised the kids and how supportive they've been over the years to everything they do, and it's like a fairy tale almost.
Well, Rich, I think it's really a study in things getting passed down from generation to generation, because I'm sure that Doug would say the same thing about the support of you and your wife, supporting his career, and it passes down. So, the funny way that this all becomes circular is in about 6 months' time, Doug will be having to squeeze himself back into a McMaster uniform. And Reid will get to be able to heckle him from the stands and maybe give him the gears a bit, because we're going to be getting together to raise a little bit of money for the Brad Reeson Memorial Scholarship, someone that we all miss. But, I think it's a unique proposition for our kids to be able to see what we used to do a little bit. And I keep saying to everybody, just don't be a horrible facsimile of what you used to do, be able to hit a catcher from 60 feet, 6 inches. So, I think that'll be a unique privilege for all of us. And, I think it is great for all of us to have 3 generations of Lunneys all there. And I'll be sure, because I could be this way. I will not hit Doug in the ribs with the ball just for the heck. I know there'll be 900 people climbing out of the stands to get at me if I do that. But I think it'll be great for Reid to see just what a great competitor Doug was as an athlete. I mean, I think you'll see snippets of it as a coach, but it comes naturally to your grandkids because I know that this is clearly a multi-generational thing, and your effect in Newmarket is felt by literally hundreds of kids now. And so, I think this will be a special time at Mac and Brock to just celebrate a great rivalry, but also some great lives that have been built off of it, and the support of parents like yourself, and you coached, and, you did other things like drive equipment and all kinds of things that go unmeasured, is important for today's parents to understand that these are the best ways you can support your kids when they're playing varsity. Only 6% of rep players play varsity. And people don't understand just how small a number that is. If you look at your rep hockey team and think, okay, out of these 23 kids that are playing here at this very elite level, a handful of them will be playing varsity 2 years from now. Or, on a baseball team, it would be the same. It'd be about 5 guys out of 23 or 5 women out of 23. That's about the number that you're dealing with. And, because, you have lower levels sometimes of rep ball. So maybe a double A or an A, you're going to have less or 0 that play. But out of an elite program, it's still not a great percentage. And I think this is a real testament to how your support, which is one of the things we can count on again when we do this all again in our 50s, for crying out loud. But I think it's great to be able to talk about this in context of how this influences people. So, Rich, I really look forward to seeing you in 6 months, and hopefully by that time I'll have dropped another 15 pounds, and Doug will have put on about 15. So I'll be shipping Krispy Kreme donuts to him constantly.
Ship them to me because I don't have to play.
Well, listen, we really, really look forward to it. And thank you for just giving us a little bit of insight into what it's like to be a parent that is on both sides of the BrockvMac rivalry and has cheered for both sides. And really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I, too, am really looking forward to seeing everybody at this game. And I don't think Reid's going to heckle his dad, but you never know. I keep telling Doug, I said, you're going to have to sign the senior roster when Reid's playing senior, and just play one game, and you play second, Reid plays short. People would love to see that double play combination. I certainly would. I know that.
I know. Well, that's the hard part is at some point we get so old that it's when we bend over to pick up a ball, we might not get back up. We have to cart them off at that point. It's tons of fun. Rich, thank you so much for today, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.